The first speaker is Zeke Torres. I think for a lot of you, Zeke doesn't really require introduction. Zeke has over 25 years of experience in SaaS. I had to significantly reduce his biography just to be able to fit it on this slide. I would say Zeke is very unique in terms of using SaaS. He has a huge amount of experience and is currently working as a SaaS architect at RedMane Technology.
All right, thank you. And I'm looking at chat just in case. So while I say a few things, if I can just make sure that everybody can hear me, that'd be great. And I'm going to do a screen share as well here. But I do want to thank, Vasily and everybody for inviting me and allowing me to join. I really appreciate it. I'm really humbled by it. And a word to the wise, or just to give everybody some notice, it is the 4th of July here in the US. And so what's happened is it's very common here in Chicago for fireworks to go off. So if you hear things that sound like pops or bangs, it is not crime related. It is very much celebratory related. And it's not uncommon for the rest of the day and probably the weekend to have that kind of thing go on. So all is safe, all is well. So I want to say hi to the SAS UK and Ireland group. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm really excited to participate in things like this, and I hope that we can exchange the favor and have members from your group join us as well for some of our future Chicago webinar events. So I want to say hello and thank you to everybody there. A long time ago, I got inspired to write SAS papers, and I found it to be very useful and educational. And I encourage you, the person who's viewing, watching, or listening, to really consider doing that. And even though you might think that you're not ready or that you need to wait for some kind of career milestone or educational milestone, I got to tell you that that's not necessarily accurate. You would be surprised how much what you've just gone through in your job and your career and your position is going to be useful to the next person who's right behind you in their career. So I highly encourage you to think about what you solved last week or last month that you thought was not going to be possible, but you did. I encourage you to go ahead and write a paper about it and share that with the next person, because you're going to learn from that process. So what this is about, this paper that I wrote, is related to some of the things that I typically am tasked to do, which is how do I take an unknown set of data and start to learn from it. Typically, I have to, obviously, we're going to look at Proc content and some of the other facts there, but they're not always structured in a way that I can cut and paste them and send them to somebody else or quickly shoot them over to somebody. And then we have a system or a platform here in the United States that is curated by the federal government, by CMS and Medicaid. It's called the VRDC, the Virtual Resource Data Center, and it holds medical claims, and they're very bureaucratic about how we share facts. And so one of the important things about that is we have to mask or hide low count cells in output. And I'll get to that in a second, but this paper was written about how gathering those little tool sets or those little macros together into a toolbox became something that was pretty useful to me. So what I had done was put those together into a cohesive macro that then I could execute. So this paper is going to cover, in this slide, I'm going to play what that looks like and show you that. And then I'll, if I have time, I'll be able to jump right into and show you what some of those macros look like as well. This code is on GitHub so that you can actually, snag a copy of it and use it for yourself. And I'll show you quickly how to actually go ahead and run that. And the platform that I'm going to use is the SAS Studio Edition on AWS. And it's going to be pretty easy to go ahead and use this within, like, let's say PC SAS or Enterprise Guide. So this slide was meant to be presented at SAS Global Forum, and it talks about the VRDC. And because I know there's a lot of people here that aren't necessarily going to be concerned with the VRDC, I'd like to skip some of it, and if we need to, and if we have time, we can come back to it, because it might be useful to somebody to know more about the VRDC, but that's not the total intent of this paper. The VRDC, again, is a data center by the government for medical claims, and the data is so big that scoping it down and learning some facts about it on a smaller scale with these tool set macros is pretty useful. So the first one is how to mask quickly for those cells that are less than 10. The government here doesn't want us to violate patient privacy by reaching into numbers or patient counts that are too small and that we might actually stumble upon somebody who has, let's say, a communicable disease or some kind of condition that could be used in a derogatory way against them. So the idea is if you have anything less than 11, you want to mask that. This is the macro that does that, and that way if you do a frequency or if you do a print or some kind of methodology like that, it will actually go ahead and give us the correct look or result with that masked value so that we don't have to be concerned with violating some kind of ethical process that the VRDC has. And if we were to request this report to be downloaded, it would be allowed. But if we were to remove that macro and just run a straight frequency, that cell that has -999 in it, it would be under that 11 value, and so they would not allow that to go through. So these are the type of facts or tools that I'm typically trying to find or see as I start to share things with users. So I'm going to jump into actual code here because I left my session open. Let me see if I can make sure what I'm sharing. I want to open up my PC SAS session wherever I can find it. Can you guys see my PC SAS session? And Vasily, I'm going to have to trust you because I can't see chat so easily. So, all right, good, I see it. Cool, thanks guys. So what I've done is, just for the sake of keeping within the time frame and not going too much further, I've gone ahead and I've run that macro in my AWS session, and I've instantiated it. And I want to thank Bart from the MWSUG group. He was the one who tipped me off to some suggestions, and I am posting those on GitHub next. But all I've done here, and thank you, Bart, again for those suggestions. I'm just QAing them before I release them, so they'll be on my branch in GitHub pretty soon. So I'm going to go ahead and run the macro virtually as is in my current master GitHub branch. And now I'm going to go ahead and use it. And so this here will give me my preferred version of a Proc contents. So to me, Proc contents is useful, but if I want to share and cut and paste these facts with somebody, the Proc contents is kind of messy. So this is, to me, a more comprehensive view that I can put into or share with somebody. And since it's kind of already in a table, I can reuse these facts in, let's say, a macro. And so to me, an ideal Proc contents gives me some facts about the table, but in a vertical way. And then it gives me at least 10 rows of sample output. But that's not the only thing in the macro. The macro, or the toolbox, has a frequency. So let's say we wanted to have the top 15 of a specific field. So let's say we want to see the top 15 of, I don't know, type. So we're going to go here and add in the frequency, put in the data set, and put in type, and run that. And now this will give us the top 15 of that field. And so if I wanted to add in model, I can put in another field here. And now I get those two. If we had a date field, we could do the same, or we could do just a straight frequency. Sorry, I can't seem to type. Now this would be a straight frequency, not just the top 15. So as you can see, the actual type has way more counts than that. So if I were to do straight frequencies, and one of the tough parts about doing frequencies after frequencies is you don't necessarily know what you're getting. And so what this helps me with is I don't have to be overwhelmed with a whole slew of counts or rows on facts that aren't necessarily relevant. I sometimes just want to know what is the most common, or what is the top 15 values that are there, so that I can maybe do some further analysis. So I want to be respectful of the 20 minutes for this. I can keep going, but I want to see if there are any questions. I'm going to jump on the chat side and kind of confirm and see. And Vasily, if you want to start transitioning, that's fine too. But I can show some more of the macros that are there. And I also encourage people to, just ping me back with any comments or ideas or suggestions you have. I am upgrading it a little bit, and like I said, I'll be posting those. I didn't want to. I do have the fixes done, but I was hesitant to do it live and suddenly have something backfire on me. So I wanted to just at least stick with the topic as it was ready to go. So,
Zeke, if your live demo is not going to go to plan, it's not going to happen the first time. Most of live demos don't really work. And as for the questions, at this point in time, we don't have any questions online. So there's nothing to pass over yet.
Cool. Yeah, well, let me know. I mean, I can show another one of the macros within that toolbox, but again, the paper kind of covers it. There's a field frequency macros for dates as well as for numbers. So I think a good one, the one that covers the Proc summary, is the one for the numbers. I've often got to work with data that has numeric fields in them, and I don't often know how healthy they are to do some statistical work. And so rather than get stuck with, let's say, here, I'm going to run this real quick and I'll get this out of the way. I'll just take one more second, guys, and I can show you. So I'm going to pick a field called horsepower. So here I'm going to type in horsepower. And if I run these all consecutively, it will start to look more like a pretty useful output to share with a fellow developer. Let's see what happened here. I think I spelled it wrong. So that numeric macro gives me the field, how many distinct values there are, the min, the max, the mean, the standard deviation, and then the variety of P's that I threw into the actual original macro. So if you felt like you wanted to customize it a little bit, sorry, I know it's scrolling really crazy. If you wanted to come in and customize it, you could tweak that. And if you have a preferred type of stats that you'd like to see with that same output, you can come in here and make those adjustments. But let's say that we wanted to look at cylinders as well. So all I got to do here is type in cylinders. And I can type in as many fields as I wish. The only upgrade that I'd like to do is maybe insert wildcards, but it does handle any numeration of fields. It does it pretty well. So now you'll see we have horsepower and cylinders, and I can add in more fields as well to that. And if I run this all together, it'll really look more like a, let's see, sorry, I had it selected. If I run it all together, now we get the table of contents, or the data dictionary for this, the sample of the 10 rows, the top 15 of cars, the model, and those two fields that we entered in numerically. So it looks more like something that we can share with some other team members or some other parts of the team. Okay, so the question is, how does it cope with large volume data sets? Any sticking points that you have for this? So it can be, I've made it to be as nimble as possible with what I would call medium to smaller data sets. Once we start getting into larger data sets, I think it becomes impractical. I think by the time you get into large volume data sets, you should have already learned from maybe scoping it down with smaller data sets. What I'm typically doing is creating subsets of larger data sets. And when I mean large, I mean the hundreds of millions of rows. into this and doing this in a kind of quick iterative way. So I'm compelled to stay away from larger data sets for this process because I meant for this to help in understanding the data, not in necessarily processing and consuming the data. So this to me was always meant to be an ideal way to have small subset data or maybe medium data go through it, but not large and unknown data. I wouldn't throw it at it because I was not looking for the most optimal performance. I was trying to keep the performance as nimble, but I wasn't that concerned because I always wanted it to be smaller data to go through anyway. So I hope that kind of answers it. So Vasily, I don't know. It's up to you. I can still show more.
Let's put it to the chat. Do you guys want to see any more macros? Bartosz says yes, twice. Anybody else?
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's perfect. So the other macro that's in here, which I thought was pretty useful, happens to be the macro for dates. And so typically one of the things that gets me is whenever I do a frequency and suddenly I don't have the right date value. And you know what? I actually am having a brain loss here. Does anybody remember which SAS help data set has dates in it? Because I can't remember, and I'm going to pay attention right now to actually get this set up. So if anybody can remember which SAS data set in help has dates, that'd be great.
Stocks. SAS help stocks.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I should know that, but this chat window. So here's how I'm actually proving how I can use my own code to remember what's in stocks. I don't remember the name of the field, so I'm going to do this and just run that. So now I'll get my contents and I'll see that it's going to be called date. So then I'll come over here and do the same. And so what I've set up this frequency to do is to give me the date frequency, but with a format of YY, 4 digits on the Y and 3 digits on the month. So that's a little bit more legible instead of the default, which often with dates is the granular date field of whatever the YY, MM, DD, or, including the date. If you did a frequency on that and you have a large data set, that could be really ugly. I just want to see that I have dates, that they're valid. So the intent of this specific frequency macro is to run it through, but give me a format that I can appreciate in understanding and diagnosing the health of that field. That's really all this thing is doing. And somebody suggested an upgrade for this is that I think is actually a good one. I am working on a frequency that will tell me that each one of the days in a year is present. I think that's an important one because often I'm working with tables or large data sets, and I know that the date has a valid value. I know that the data is there. I just want to know that every single day of a year is represented. And so to me, that's something that can go in as a QA or some kind of quality metric to ensure that a patient has, or a client or a specific index of something, right? A patient or a claim or something has representation in key date windows. So if we set up a 12-month window, then we want to see values for each of those 12 months. But if we set up a yearly window, then we want to see 365 values or 365 distinct values. So I am testing a few different variations of that, but that's one that I'm testing with more for performance, because obviously as you nest that process with different child to parent relationships, it could become performance intensive. So I love Proc Summary. You'll see me use Proc Summary a lot. I'm looking for ways to leverage that, but not mess up on the performance, but still embed it within a macro where I can pass in those fields easily, and kind of allow somebody to be able to tell that yes, these are the patients that meet the criteria to have an instance in 12 months or an instance in 365 days or one instance every quarter. Those to me are useful because we oftentimes build cohorts or criteria to find those types of scenarios first and then use that subset of patients for further analysis, because if they're not present in every one of the months or every one of the years or every one of the quarters, that is not the ideal type of patient to look for. But that could be applied to car insurance claims as well, or other methodologies of insurance. But that one's there. That one's ready to go if it helps anybody. And another upgrade to this process is I do believe that in naming standardization of fields, and I'm trying to set this up so that with a function like an index C or a find W, if it flags that it's a date in the field name or the variable name, then it will run it by itself on its own through the find frequency date function or macro. If it sees that it's a straight numeric, it'll run it automatically by itself through the numeric macro. So I'd like to make it smarter, so that I don't have to go and find what the date fields are. So I can just type in this, and it would on its own through macros give me what the dates are that it perceives are dates, as long as it's typed in the variable name DA to E. So I think that there's some standardization or some improvements to do, but they're just keep posted, see if it follow my Git branch or my Git repo and see if it helps you guys.
Thank you very much, Zeke. So do we have any other questions from the attendees? I have a one question on my own. How long did it take you to prepare this, and how did you go about formatting it all together and keeping it in such an organized way?
It's people who know me and work with me or have worked with me know that these have existed for some time. I usually leave them where I work, or I show people where I'm at my toolbox. So think of me like a carpenter going from site to site, and I have my toolbox with my hammer and my tool sets. This is just an accrual of different macros and tool sets that I found useful over years. So sharing them isn't a big deal because I find them useful to me, and I'd rather find them laying around somewhere. Now with Git, it becomes a lot more easy to port them to where I'm going, or to bring them with me. Normally I would bring a flash drive or something, but I don't have a problem with proc contents. It's just not always useful. I don't have a problem with proc frequency. I just hate running it on a date field. So there's lots of things that I do and I use. I just wanted them my way, not necessarily the out-of-the-box SAS way. So gathering them together has just been a constant kind of refinement or improvement. And I'm happy that Git's there because it makes it so much easier to test stuff. But 4 or 5 years ago, it was all over the place. I didn't have them all together. And then I just kind of brought them together once I started really embracing Git and what I could do to integrate things with. That's when it really started to happen, or make it more useful.
Okay. Thank you very much.